Time. This is Tuesday, March the 14th, 2023, and it is according to the thing 11:08. We're in the Board of Supervisors Executive Conference Room, Melody Lane Bisbee. Any item on this agenda is open for discussion, and we'll begin with the roll call. District 1.
Crosby's here.
District 2, Supervisor English is present. District 3.
Supervisor Judd is here.
Thank you. We have a complete board this morning. Members of the public may attend this meeting by Microsoft Teams computer or mobile app, or by phone by calling 602-609-7513 or 888-680-6714, conference ID 478-766-803#. If you have trouble accessing the meeting remotely, call 520-432-9200 for directions. Work sessions are a time for the county staff to inform and discuss agenda items with the Board of Supervisors, and public comments will not be taken. As always in our work sessions, it makes the clerk's job easier if we identify ourselves as we speak and tell what our title is. So that will be the introductions. Today, we're looking at the Community Development Block Grant, and Dan Coxworth, our Development Services Director, is going to tell us where we are on this.
Morning, Madam Chair, Supervisor Crosby, and I think Supervisor Judd is online.
Yes.
I'm just going to hand this over to Susan Bronson. I just want to introduce her to you. She's a new planner here with Cochise County. She is new to us, but she has a lot of experience in planning, and she came over from SEGO, and I was thankful because CDBG is what she did over there. So she's very familiar with the program, has good contacts at the state to make sure we're doing everything correctly. So I'll just hand it over to Susan, and she has a 10-minute presentation.
Yeah, and we don't get these very often, so it isn't like the board can keep current on what's happening with CDBG, because it's like, every 6 years, something like that.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. So we have a PowerPoint for you just on the basics of CDBG as a refresher. So you may already know it's a federal grant program. It's administered by the Arizona Department of Housing. There's certain criteria that must be met. The criteria is that the project must primarily benefit low and moderate income people, or it must prevent or eliminate slum or blight, or it must meet urgent needs related to health and safety. Low and moderate income persons is defined as 81% of the average income in our area. So in our area, that would translate to a one-person family who makes less than $31,000 and a four-person family who makes less than $44,400. By definition, seniors and domestic violence survivors and the disabled are also deemed low income. All right, so in addition to meeting that criteria that we just talked about, only particular types of projects qualify, and the project type that the county would need to select would either need to be housing or public facilities, public services, or a planning project. So regarding housing, project examples are owner-occupied housing rehabilitation, and emergency repair would fall under that, or another type of project would be new construction by an eligible organization, activities that support new housing construction, and homeowner assistance. For public facilities, different types of projects would be roads, sidewalks, water, sewer lines, parks, community facilities. And example projects that fall into public services would be child care, job training, health care, substance abuse, crime prevention. The project can also be a planning project. You can use the funds for your comp plans, community plans, other types of plans. This year is Cochise County turn to receive CDBG funds, and the funds will be approximately $498,000. We have complied with the public participation process to date. We were required to publish the notice of availability of funds in the newspaper. We held a public hearing a couple of weeks ago, and then we're also required to hold a public hearing with you all. And at that public hearing, you would select your project. And staff and development services would recommend consideration of doing the owner-occupied housing rehabilitation program. That is owner-occupied. It can't be someone who's renting a property. It can't be someone who lives out of state, who has a second home, who's applying for these funds. It has to be an owner who's actually living in the home. And emergency repair falls under that. So that would be an owner-occupied housing unit that has an emergency need for repairs. Those repairs are limited by ADOH to $15,000 per house, and there is not a requirement that there be home insurance on the emergency repair. If you choose to go beyond the $15,000, where it's not an emergency, but you're doing more substantial housing rehab, then you can exceed the $15,000 limit, but the property has to be insured. And with that, we're here to discuss and answer questions for you all.
Well, let me start out by asking this question, because that was the one time that we tried this in the past. That was the stumbling block, was the insurance. That was a long time ago, and now we're saying we could do emergency repairs up to $15,000. What can be done for $15,000? Can anyone give me a ballpark of what kind of repairs could be done within that range?
Like a roof that needs a repair, or a new roof, an HVAC system, maybe someone's heating went out completely and they need a heat pump, something like that could likely be done.
I think mold remediation possibly.
Right.
I mean, they have to qualify. They have to be low to moderate income. And then once they're qualified, then the funds can be used for those purposes. You know, if there's an event in Cochise County, such as high winds that do a lot of damage, or a flooding event, we've seen some of those more recently, then these funds could be available to help some of those people. Initially, we thought just of doing a emergency home repair program, but through the advice of the state ADOH, they said have an umbrella program for a housing rehabilitation program, and then under that umbrella put emergency home repair. So it does make for a bigger tent for more people to potentially participate in this program.
What do you mean, Dan? About bigger tent, more people participate, because that's my concern also. Basically, if you're going to, hand it out in $15,000 pieces, you're going to have less pieces than if you hand it out in $100 for food, $100 for utilities. So I'm thinking food and utilities probably doesn't even enter into this at all, as far as a subsidy for
food. I'm not sure. What about utilities?
Not under the owner-occupied housing rehab, no.
Okay.
But that was an issue when somebody wanted to do insulation repair for somebody's trailer. When I was on the city council, why don't you just have no insulation and pay more for electricity or something like that? So I'm just thinking about the best way to utilize it for the most people and so on.
Yeah. The staff, we didn't get any suggestions from the public through our notifications at our public meeting. So this is an idea that we came up from staff, and partially because there has been a need in the past with the number of homeowners that have damage to their home, and they just don't have the financial resources to repair that damage to their home. And City of Sierra Vista had the program very similar to this, and they have received a lot of applications from county residents, which don't qualify for the city CDBG fund. So we would look at a program similar to Sierra Vista. The demand does seem to be there. The other reason we're looking at this program is it could be used countywide. It's not specific to any district. It's not a specific project to any district. So
I know that we're not here to talk about a specific place and issue, but you're familiar with the property, kind of the top of Hargis Road. It's been before you in emails. What could be done, in your opinion, about that, and whether you want to call it blight, repair the place, fix their water pipes, that kind of thing, and this kind of money?
if they qualify, if they make that.
Well, you don't even know who owns the property, though. That's one of the.
Yeah, there's more of a legal implication
Right.
through code enforcement, and I would imagine that legal implication of our ability to do something about it because of the unusual circumstances really wouldn't change.
Okay.
Yeah. As much as I'd like to use
Here's a problem. Let's put it on the problem instead of trying to find a problem, you know?
Yeah. And that could be a separate discussion about the process we go through to address some code issues where you have absentee property owners, like they're deceased,
Right.
and we don't know who their heirs are or who to mail to. It's very challenging to get things through courts and things like that.
I
So
understand.
that's not the only property in the county where we struggle with that type of situation. There's one in Douglas as well, and we basically our hands are tied. There's also other situations where there's blight and the property needs to be cleaned up, but somebody's purchased a tax lien.
Okay, well, it also, I noticed health concerns was a criteria also. Somewhere in your statistics, I think you're about on this page, and you're talking about it does mention family size, but you gave some more detailed notes. Could you repeat those to me?
Yes. EDOH has a chart that defines what 80% of median income is per region. So for our region, the one-person household equates to 31,000. So if you had a single person in a house, they would need to make less than 31,000. A four-member family would need to make it was 44,400.
Okay, that's exactly what I was looking
Yeah.
for. Thank you so much.
You bet.
I think one reason probably you didn't get any people coming out when you advertised is because in the past, it was like every year, every other year. And so it was on the conscious level of all the little small communities to think about the next CDBG round and what they could qualify for. And it's been so long that they haven't even thought about that as an option. So they're not looking for that notice in the newspaper. And so that's why you didn't get any organizations or people from Bowie or the different Elfrida places that have always in the past said, we need help with our water system. We need help with this or that or the other, and wanted help through the CDBG grant.
Yeah, and infrastructure projects really are somewhat of the easiest things to a way to spend the money because $500,000 isn't much at all. One project would take that, so it would have to be a decision of Fort Worth project rises to the most importance, like Elfrida Water District, but $500,000 is not going to get them where they need to be, and that might have been a deterrent as well. I think they need more like $2 million.
Well, and we know in Bowie the water system, isn't adequate.
Probably at least $1 million for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think-
Bowie has found a benefactor. The big transmission line is coming through, and they need water, so they're going to assist Bowie in that privately. So just so you can put that to rest. If I could ask a question, I realize that is a very limited fund, and we're going to be helping a moderate amount of families. So even at the 15,000 level, we still aren't going to help a whole bunch of families. How are they going to find out about it? Will it be like if there is a disaster and they reach out to the county, or are we going to advertise it in some way? Because that seems almost impossible to advertise something like this, because almost everyone has either a water heater that's bad, something that's essential to their home HVAC, like you mentioned. A lot of people don't have those already. So how would we go about that? Maybe through food banks, or how would we go about advertising this kind of thing?
So Supervisor Judd, the city of Bisbee just went through this process. They had some Colonias CDBG funding that they elected to use for owner-occupied housing rehab. And so they limited it to one of their areas that has been designated a Colonia. They have 3. And they did public hearings. And they also did some public meetings. They did a meeting in one of the schools. And then they even did flyers. I can't remember if that was in utility bills. But they did, fairly substantial public outreach. And even with that amount of outreach, their problem was not having too many people apply. It was having too few people apply. So they actually had more money than they were able to spend initially. But remember, that's a limited area. That was Colonia. That was the Saginaw area, if you all are familiar with that. This would be countywide. So you open the door to many more people. But there are ways of getting the word out through having some workshops and flyers, neighborhood meetings. What you add?
Yeah, I think, we have the EPA grant, and when that was new, it took some effort to get the word out so people are aware that the funding is available for assessments. We would do something similar where we would meet with realtor groups. We would meet with community associations, Rotaries if necessary, but also the Board of Supervisors. You're probably out in the communities as much or more so than us, talking with your constituents.
My question was that should we promote that when we're in neighborhoods where they would have need most likely. So the second question is, would people in a city, if you were in the city of Benson or the city of Wilcox, would they qualify for this?
Yes, they would.
Okay.
We're all in the county.
Okay, what about Sierra Vista, because they already have their program, or is their program gone?
They still have their program. I think we would suggest that they apply through the city of Sierra Vista for that funding. I don't know the specifics of their program, if ours could be tailored slightly different than theirs. Maybe there's a gap with their services. But I think if they're in the city of Sierra Vista, we would go through a process of deciding, which project should be funded based on need.
Okay, thank you.
There's another group that is, quote, out in the community more than us, and it's the deputies. And the ones I was thinking of is the treasurer's office and the deputies that did the tax roll investigations that we watched, handful after handful of these. They weren't tax liens, but they're going in that direction.
They're abandoned properties, personal property, abandoned personal.
And you can work through the churches as well.
Well, today we're not scheduled to make a decision on this, but I think it's given us some reason to think that if this is the best project. So when would you be bringing the decision to the board? Is that already calendared?
March 28th. We'd like to do your next meeting, please.
So at that point in time, if the board had any criteria that they wanted to add or look at, it probably would be appropriate for them, each one of us board members, to talk with Dan, or I want to call you Sharon.
There's a name, Susan.
No, but Sharon, just you know the reason. So to talk with you ahead of time so that we could put something together and not really have to hash it out completely, at the board meeting on the 28th. So if any of us have any ideas about how we might like to do this, I mean, you're saying a maximum of 15,000. If you think that if the board says, well, we'd like to put it down to 10 to help more or whatever, I'm not saying that's a good idea. I'm just saying that if you have any ideas, run them through Dan and community development before we get to the meeting so that there could be answers rather than bringing up questions at that time. Does that sound reasonable? You have any questions, Ms. Judd?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, I'm glad we have the money. I'm glad that there's going to be an opportunity for us to help some people or some communities. We sit here and we talk about, well, $500,000 is not much money or $1 million is not much money. That always sounds strange to the public who who wishes that their lottery ticket would be pulled and, and they would get 500,000 or 1 billion. But, when you have 6,000 square miles in a county and a population that more than half of it is below the level that we could help or at the level that we could help, that really changes the complexion of what $500,000 will do. But it's a significant amount and it will help a lot of people, no matter what project we put in place.
And Supervisor English, there's other CDBG money that's available. This is non-competitive. You all,
Right.
you the county, we the county are entitled to this, but there's also competitive CDBG that you could apply for more money and use it on the same program if you wanted or something else. There's a state-specific funding pot, and there's the Colonius funding pot, which is competitive, but there aren't that many in the state, and it goes underserved, and that's a larger sum. I think that's $2 million pot.
And they're struggling to find recipients, aren't they?
Right.
And so I think that when you say colonias, what is that, 60 miles from the border?
100.
100 miles from the border? It keeps getting further and further. In the beginning, it was like 15 miles from the border, things like, and now everybody wants to be close to the border, because of the funding. Any other comments?
Yes, indeed. The biggest bang for the buck may be a wide variety of expense levels for projects. In other words, when I say widest dispersal, it's a good idea. However, we might have some projects that are up to the max, and we might have some that are, $100. So I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to say they all should fit such and such a level.
How hard will it be? I say how hard, that's probably not what I want to ask. How time consuming will it be to get people qualified?
It is relatively time consuming, to be candid, it's doable, but you have criteria and the applicants are required to verify their income. They're required to disclose bank statements, tax returns, and things like that based upon published criteria. So they know in advance what they would need to provide. It is going to require staff time and effort. The process is.
Yeah, like I said, sometimes there's just a project. You can infrastructure project, boom, get it done. And that was a consideration of mine, is how much of our time is this going to take? In my opinion, I think the need is out there in the community. I think we'll be able to qualify. We'll have a pretty good system in place to qualify people. It will be time consuming, but I'm not too concerned.
And the city
Capacity for us to do it.
SB does it. City of Service, do they manage to do it?
Well, the reason I brought that up is because sometimes, when you want to serve the most number of people, you spend too much time with the administrative work for the $1,000 that they get, and so that's one reason to look at, what are the maximum and minimums, that you would look at. So I think you've given us something to think about. Yes, Mr.
How about what is the consideration for time-consuming criteria for time and effort by the applicant? In other words, is there anything that the applicant should be expected to be able to do or find inexpensive professional help to fill out the forms or whatever else?
Right, and Bisbee, again, who just went through this recently, they had some volunteers who assisted people in putting together the information they needed to provide to get income qualified. And it's a commitment. They are required to verify their income, so they're going to have to produce the documents necessary to do that.
Okay.
But they, excuse me.
That's okay. Volunteers can potentially do at least some of the administrative paperwork. So if that's the case, then can professional or semi-professional people be subsidized to do the time-consuming criteria as well?
Administration that we would be doing?
It would be like a third party, right? Correct. We would hire a third party potentially, or
Just putting it out there.
yeah. I mean, it's a good point. I hope it's not that time consuming and bog us down, so we don't do what we do on an everyday basis up in development services. I don't know if it's an eligible expense.
Are we referring to,
Some kind of administrative stuff that, well, if you're going to say it's time-consuming criteria for staff, and I understand that. So if it could be done by either volunteers, which you indicated at some level that it could be done by volunteers, then perhaps it could also be done by low-expense, semi-professional form filler outers,
are we talking about the income qualification or the administration of the grant?
whatever it takes to make it work.
We're accountable to Department of Housing, and they're accountable to Housing and Urban Development in Washington. So I personally would not recommend using a volunteer on that basis
Okay,
because
of
of the
potential for
accountability.
fraud. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the way that volunteers might help is to help spread the word. You know, to tell people what the criteria is, you know, to go to organizations, like you said, the food banks or, you know, places where people congregate and have fewer needs, churches, etc.
My experience with, I'm sorry, Peggy, go ahead.
They could help people fill out their paperwork and help them gather up the paperwork. At the home level, they could help. And I'm sorry, if I could just insert one more thing. CCAP already does the community, or Southeastern Arizona Community Action Program, already does some of this type thing if they find people with needs. And I'm wondering if they wouldn't be even a partner. Maybe, Dan, should I have somebody call you from CCAP and talk about how they might do some of this administrative stuff and still use our funding stream?
If we could talk candidly,
We can.
the organization that we would reach to and is a partner with ADOH. If we were to seek a partnership, it should be SECO.
Okay.
And they are required to review our application. They're not required to write it, but to that degree, we need to work with SECO. It's because it's their area of expertise. It's what they do, and it would probably be a bit of an insult to them if instead of using them as your technical assistants, you used another organization. I understand the context that they have, but
Sorry.
go ahead.
I was going to say that we could reach out to other partners and explore this, but it seems like historically, I think the focus needs to be to get the word out, because I don't think we'll be bogged down on the administrative side. I think that's the hope, right? That we do get all these applications, and I think we can look at getting more assistance with the administrative aspect of it.
But I certainly think, Peggy, if this is approved by the board on the 28th, that if you contact that organization, they may have people that need services, and certainly, you know, they should be willing to tell those people where to come for the services. So
Okay.
they do provide some services to the same level that we're talking about, the criteria, the income, etc. So yeah, working with them that way, it's just not going to be an intergovernmental agreement type working. It's like, let's get the word out so that we can serve the most people.
They could probably put that on their website.
Right.
My experience is it'll be slow once the money is available in October, but then it gains momentum.
Right. When somebody gets some money,
Right.
then yeah.
It gains momentum and the word gets out. So it'll build. I anticipate that it'll build over time. How many years do we have to spend?
I think it's 18 months.
So we have a year and a half.
Right.
So there is a time frame to be done with this.
Well, if it hasn't been spent, we can always raise the amount and move in another direction,
And
as
Department
long as it's same.
Yes, Department of Housing did recommend that their recommendation is not to limit yourselves to the emergency repair, to apply for the owner-occupied housing rehab, and you all can have the criteria to spend it as you wish. But that was a recommendation to make it broader.
Right.
You can always go higher, but if you don't include that, you won't have that option if someone needed $20,000 worth of.
That's the reason that you gave us the idea that you went for the umbrella rather than specifics. So yeah, we'll certainly make mention of that at the board meeting. Any other comments before I close this meeting? Okay, then I will say that our next meeting will be today at 1:30 in the Board of Supervisors Executive Conference Room for a work session regarding Public Works Department informational update. Having said that, this work session is adjourned.